Jesus taught, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes, have the best seats, etc., etc. That's one reason I don't wear these to the Kroger. I don't want to be caught in the long robes in the marketplace, as Jesus says not to do. This is one of those crazy readings that it's easy simply to disregard, because we don't have folks walking around literally in long robes all too often, except for an hour on Sunday morning. And we don't have people that are making a big show of how much they put into the temple treasury, except perhaps when you look at a building that has someone's name on it because they donated the majority of the funds, or enough to have the naming rights. It's a different kind of reading that can be hard to get into, to see how it applies to an average person's everyday life. And so I want to give you a little bit of background on it, see if we can open it up for you. One is that despite what we may picture, as people are doing the giving into the temple treasury, and it describes the rich people putting big amounts in and sort of waving their hands around, going, yay, me. There probably aren't a lot of them. It says there's some of them. There were some. But probably there were more people like the widow who put in a very small amount of money, just by demographics. In first century Jerusalem, there weren't a lot of wealthy people. There weren't a lot of people who could give out of their abundance and still have a large amount. Most people were going to be like the poor widow who's describing this story, who put in a penny, a couple coins. When the first English Bibles were translated, they used the term mite. So you may have heard this story being the one of the widow's mite, M-I-T-E, because that was the smallest coin, the smallest denomination coin being made in Europe and Britain during the 1600s and a little bit before. It was worth hardly anything, less than a modern penny. And so that did accurately translate what was the meaning of that coin. So kind of picture a quarter of a penny or something like that today. That's how much she put in. But there were probably lots of people who didn't put in as little as she did, since Jesus probably would have noted that, but who couldn't have put in a whole lot more. Maybe 2 mites, 4 mites, 10 mites, still not a whole lot. That would have been the majority of the givers as they walked to the temple, to the church, so to speak, and put money in the big stone offering plate, is the best way to think of it today. They were not being able to give the large amounts, or the picture of the big cardboard check that people use to get a photo taken. Then the big givers have the big check and they're exchanging business cards with each other so they can properly network to make more big checks for other purposes. Instead, it was people, the vast majority, walking up and just giving a little bit, and giving a little bit, and giving a little bit. The other interesting thing to think about is that when this story would have been first read out loud, the temple was gone. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and probably this story was written down for the first time just about that time. It was transmitted orally. People will remember what Jesus said when we were sitting over there that time about the widow and what she gave, and people say, oh yeah, I remember that. We should tell other people. That was an important story. It's an important enough story that it is found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But it would not have actually been written down on a papyrus or a paper, so to speak, until the time that the temple was gone. So people would not have been saying, we need to write this down so that when we go to the temple, we know what to give. We shouldn't, that would have been nonsense to them. The temple was gone. What was still there, what was still everywhere, were people. The building's gone, the architecture destroyed by the Romans, but all of the types of people in this story remain, and remain with us today. And this is where the story, I think, gets interesting for us today. Because The person who gave out of their abundance didn't have to think about it. Maybe you had to figure out, well, how much less of this or that will I buy this week? But the person who gave the most of what they had was the one who really had to pray about this. Think about it. Decide this. And one of the things that that woman did when she gave so much of what she had was she decided she was going to rely on the community. Because one of the underlying tenets of Judaism and Christianity, particularly in the first century, was the first people you took care of were widows. If you read through either the New Testament or the Old Testament, over and over, if God does evaluation of a group of people, if a prophet has a how are you doing sort of prophecy, it's always about how are you treating the widows among you. It happens again and again and again. So, part of what this story is telling us is that this woman was willing to trust her community. She was willing to trust her parish. She was willing to trust her congregation, that she was going to be fed that night. She was going to be fed from then on. That is one of those teachings that the first Christian said needs to be preserved. That we need to remind ourselves again and again that we have to take care of each other. That we have to take care of those who have the least among us. Because they are often going to be giving everything they have to make this world a better place. They are going to be giving out of their time, their money, all those resources to make this world better. And we should directly be doing something similar in terms of making this world better. Now, one of the reasons I hate this reading, is that it's been exploited by unethical church people for centuries to get folks to give money. I still get mailings from sham preachers who send me a nickel, and they said, you're getting this nickel so that you'll send me $10, because that's how God says this should work. And if you send me $10, then God will send you $100. It's this weird, terrible, what's called prosperity gospel theology that just isn't true. And it allows a lot of unscrupulous clergy to drive really nice cars, have great big houses. So I just hate this reading. This is one that I'd rather skip. But it does give me a chance to tell you that this reading is not about people giving more than they can afford to give. Even though we're still wrapping up our pledge campaign, so if you want to give a whole lot, please do. If you want to give $1 gazillion, we will be part of the building for you. Yeah, sure. But this reading is not about exploiting poor people in order to make the church bigger. And I think one of the reasons we can say for sure it's not about this is that the very building that was donated to was destroyed within 40 years of this event happening. That both the rich donations and the donations from the poor folks did not keep the temple safe from the terrible, terrible work of the Romans. That's not what happened. God did not say, oh, you gave everything and therefore I'm going to give you $1 million. The poor woman did not become rich. Instead, it was this reminder that we have to care for each other. And this reminder that we have to be able to give of ourselves, of our love, of the love that God has given us to care for the people around us, in the church building and well beyond it, to give the socks this time of year, to give towards the Thanksgiving meal this time of year, and throughout the year at Holy Family, other causes, and throughout your lives, I'm sure you give to many important works that help people be fed and kept warm and educated and healthy and all those things. That's what this story is about, is giving and giving because it is the way that God's love is spread. It's not spread by building the biggest temple in the world, as was the intent of King Herod, not a religious man at all. He just wanted a big edifice. It's not about having the most seats in your church in 2018. It's instead about loving the world and showing that through giving of our money, through our time, through our skills, all those things. It's not about having the very best of things. It's about sharing the very best that God has given us. And often, that is simply sharing who we are. Because the way that the love of God is spread is by loving Him. We usually make the equation much more complicated than that. And say we need this much money, we need this much infrastructure, we need these many committees. But what it really comes down to is, are we willing to love people? Particularly people that seem really different from us. Particularly people that have different political views, that have different economic status, that live in a different neighborhood, whatever might make someone feel different to us. We're still called to love them. And then when we are standing in line at the temple in the year 30 or so, and we're all putting our contributions into the big limestone bucket, we realize we're all equal in the eyes of God, regardless of how much is going in that bucket. Because we have had that insight and that experience as we've loved people around us. The more we get to know the stranger, the more we realize they're not strange at all. Instead, they're just another edition of someone just like us, just like me. It's that odd relationship, and only odd because humans make it so. We are one species. We are one human family. We are the group of creation that God made with the capacity to love and care for each other. And that's really the key to this story. This reminder that we are called to care for one another, both people near and far, and to anticipate that people will need us, will need our help, will need our support, will need food from us, because they have given so much to love the world, trusting that the church, that their friends, that strangers will be there for them, to care for them so they can care for others. And the cycle goes on, and it doesn't matter if any building remains, because the human race continues to love in the name of God, and therefore the world becomes a better place, filled with God's grace, filled with God's hope, filled with God's healing. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.